And we're back again. So take two. So nice to see you again, David. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you for having me back again.
And this time around, everyone, we're going to go into further detail with the next subject that we're talking about. So just something we're going to add on to the previous recording. So yeah, we're going to crack on now.
Yeah. So when we were talking, Anthony, and yourself, David, afterwards, there was a subject we started to talk about that we never mentioned. Can we talk about the Mercury retrograde thing?
Yeah. Okay. Retrograde means apparent backward motion, right? So planets do not go backwards, right? But we're on a ball going around a star with other balls going around us, right, at different speeds. So if you have one planet on the moving along slowly, and then a faster inner planet undertakes it on the inside, if you were standing on the surface of that inner planet, relatively, it looked like the outer one is moving backwards, even though it isn't. And then by the time you've gone round the other side of the star, it looks like they're kind of going in forward motion again.
Okay.
So it was noted way back in ancient Greece that it looked as if things were making this curious kind of retrograde loop. And so some people said, it kind of changes the intensity of the planet. In 1665, William Lee wrote in Christian Astrology that if you're going to ask a question, so you can use astrology a bit like a divination tool, like shuffling tarot cards, right? It's a thing called horary astrology, which means of the hour. So you ask a question and you draw up a chart for the time and date the question is asked, or rather the time and date that the astrologer receives the question. And then from that chart, you can then answer the question, right? And there are certain conditions that mean that the question can be answered. And there are certain conditions that mean, no, it's a good question, but wrong idea, wrong time, right? One of the things that impedes an astrologer's ability to answer the question is if Mercury is retrograde at the time the astrologer receives the question.
Okay.
The suggestion is that Mercury being retrograde, Mercury rules, if you like, thinking, our cognition. So if it's retrograde, then our cognition is impeded. So it's not that you can't answer the question, but your ability to be accurate or clear is impeded, right? Now, William Lilly did not say that the tools of communication would be problematical. He didn't say your inkwell would dry up, and he didn't say your quill would snap, right? He's talking about this. This is the winged messenger, our central nervous system, not the devices or tools of communication. Fast forward to the 1980s, and some guy in New York decides to say that it's your phone will break down or electrical devices will go wrong. Now, in astrology, electricity or electrical technology is governed or ruled by Uranus, the planet that rules Aquarius. So electrical devices are nothing to do with Mercury at all. That's one thing. So the whole thing of Mercury retrograde having something to do with, your washing machine breaking down and machines going wrong or losing your phone is astrologically incorrect anyway. Okay? Now, there's another thing about cause. You might notice that when it's snowing, some people love snow and some people can't stand snow.
Yeah.
So we're all in our locality in the same atmospheric condition. It's snowing, and some people are rejoicing and some people are mourning. So you notice that even when there's a universal kind of atmospheric condition, we still have different individual responses.
Yeah.
So to say that snow causes joy wouldn't be correct. To say that snow causes despair wouldn't be correct, because they're generalizations and they're bound to be inaccurate, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that a planet going, appearing to go backwards will definitely cause all of these things to happen to you without any doubt whatsoever at all is going to be preposterous. If Mercury retrograde did cause phones to break down, it would be a recognized phenomenon within the industry of phone manufacture. They would have R&D departments to kind of see if they could find a way around it.
Yeah.
Insurance companies would say, you could lose a phone by theft. You can lose a phone by accident. You can lose a phone by damage. You can lose the phone by dropping it in the bath. You can lose a phone by Mercury retrograde, meaning it's gone wrong. And so they would up the prices of their premiums to every time there's going to be Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
So you'd find that insurance is cheaper when it's going direct motion, and the price goes up when it's in, So none of that happens. The industry hasn't observed that mobile phones always go wrong when Mercury's retrograde. So that kind of makes you wonder, why not? Why aren't the people who are actually involved in the industry noticing this?
Yeah.
And there's a high possibility, of course, that Mercury retrograde doesn't cause anything. Now, you could start saying, hold on a minute, though. Don't astrologers believe that planets influence things? Well, actually, no, not all astrologers do think that. See, one of the things I found on the MA is that in ancient Greece, there were different philosophies about how astrology worked. So Plato and Aristotle both went with the idea that planets have influence, like magic rays. So if you put the Earth at the center of the universe, then the planets go around the Earth in concentric rings like a dartboard. Right? So they saw it that you have the will of the prime mover, and when it goes through the lensing of Saturn, it gets modified and adapted. And it's adapted at Jupiter, it's adjusted by Mars and the Sun and so forth. And when you get to the sublunar world, it creates pressures. These pressures hit you on the head, pressures of lust and greed and whatever. And that changes your character, and therefore that influences your behavior. Right? And that was kind of the template for astrology for a long time. There was a library in Alexandria that, called the Great Library. And it was burned down by Julius Caesar under the orders of King Constans. And Claudius Ptolemy was the last curator of the Great Library of Alexandria. He wrote books like Almagest and Tetrabiblos in about 100 AD. When the library burnt down, some of these manuscripts were snuck away into the Islamic world. And then they eventually found their way into the Crusade routes and went back into Europe again. And that kind of kick-started the Renaissance, right?
Yeah.
So Ptolemy's ideas were sort of it. They were the template of astrology for about 1,500 years. But people didn't know that that was just one philosophical view. It only came to light that there were other philosophical views around the 1600s. And it was discovered that the Stoics had a completely different idea. They saw astrology not as cause, but as correlation. So a modern idea might be, if you're driving through a city that's unfamiliar, you might have a sat-nav. And at the moment, anyway, the sat-nav doesn't decide where you're going. You do. You are the agency. So all the sat-nav does is describe the territory. It doesn't create the city. The city is created by the great planners before you arrive. You decide if you want to follow the navigation map. You decide if you're going left or right or stop or starting or reverse or forwards. Right? All the sat-nav does is correlate with the territory, but it doesn't cause you to move through it. So a lot of astrologers, including me, see astrology as something as correlation. So astrology describes dynamics and facets of your life. It can be used to describe constructs of your childhood, what you experienced in the early conditioning, the formative years of your life. It doesn't cause your life to come into being, but it describes what your life is.
Yeah.
So your psychological relationship with your mum and your dad in your very formative years, the language you heard around you, informed the lexicon of your vocabulary. Astrology doesn't cause that, but your chart would show me exactly what that vocabulary was. The next quantum leap then is how come that works?
Yeah.
And you need to kind of like look at chaos theory and systems theory to start getting close to how that can be a thing. So from a perspective of synchronicity, astrology correlates, but it doesn't cause things. And it might sound a bit strange for an astrologer to say that there are no influences from planets at all. But in terms of Newtonian physics, it just doesn't add up. You know, I know we've got, you know, gravity from the moon, but everything else is too far away.
Yeah.
And it can't be electromagnetic, because if you had a radio mast on Pluto and it was broadcasting, you know, a song, and you looked at it through a telescope, by the time that song has reached the Earth, Pluto would have moved position, because it takes so long. And so that would also render the notion of making note of the location of things completely pointless. You know, so yes, how astrology works and the things is another day on its own. I strongly recommend you do my introduction class, because we cover all this kind of stuff.
Awesome.
But yeah.
So Mercury retrograde, when you see people putting it all over Facebook, it's not a thing, basically.
Not to me. I also think it's irresponsible as well. As I was saying to you before, that you know, there are some superstitions that are quite sort of harmless in a way. Cracks in the pavement and all that sort of thing, lucky numbers, I guess that could be slightly inconvenient, but it only affects the person who has the belief.
Yeah.
You know? Whereas to write on a social platform that there's a phenomenon that's going to happen next week, and when the cloud comes over the sun, all of the things you enjoy in your life are going to fall apart. That's a terrifying prospect. You know, I've actually seen conversations between people in news feeds, young people saying, Mercury's going to be retrograde next week. Oh, you better watch out. Right, what's going to happen? Well, your phone might break down. And the other person got really scared by it.
Yeah.
You know, so if someone's depressed or they're borderline suicide, and then you tell them for a fact, not like this might happen, but it is definitely going to happen, that stuff in their life is going to break down or fall apart, that could push them over the edge.
Yeah.
And so I think we have a public duty to warn people of things that we genuinely understand that could happen. You know, if I see there's danger coming, it's my public duty to let you know, hey, watch out, there's a genuine danger on its way. But to scare the pants off people by warning them about something that has absolutely no effect whatsoever at all is just, yeah, I can't really get my head around why people would want to do that, unless they're motivated by, I know, marketing, trying to get people to log into their their channel, or be attuned to them in some way, or maybe pay for things like books or workshops or something. You know, yeah. But it's far more interesting things to talk about that have a genuine correlation than something that just doesn't stack up. Otherwise, all of us would find our phones break down whenever Mercury's retrograde.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Not in a tangible way. No.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you, David. That's been awesome.
Okay.
We won't take up any more of your time. We've taken up loads of your time already. It's been a real inspiration listening to you.
That might throw a cat among a few pigeons for some people, by the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, but at least you're going to get the letters, not me. So
yeah, thanks.
Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you again this time next week, everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.